It had been her 45th birthday. But Janis Joplin wasn't there. She died at 27 years of age of a drug overdose, October 4, 1970. Her hometown of Port Arthur, Texas, an oil and refining center of 58,000 people, honored Janis with a bust and memorial. The director of the city's Convention and Visitors Bureau said, quote, "This could do for Port Arthur what Elvis Presley did for Memphis."
I'll make you feel like you are the only man. Well, yeah, I'll give you nearly everything that a woman possibly can. Honey, you know I did. But each time I tell my...
Janis Joplin wasn't the only rock singer of the 60s to die from the very substances glorified in song. Though David Crosby, Eric Clapton, and Keith Richards survived their addictions, others did not. Jimi Hendrix suffocated in a pool of his own vomit after an overdose. Jim Morrison followed him to a similar fate, as did Brian Jones of the Stones, who drowned in his private swimming pool while high. Other stars of the 60s who were victims of drugs include a long list. They include Tommy Bolin of Deep Purple, who died of heroin, and Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham, who expired from a combination of alcohol and drug-related overindulgences. When it comes to drunken addiction, the most dramatic example of self-destruction was the $35-a-week truck driver who amassed a career income of $4.3 billion. I'm itching like a man on a fuzzy tree. My friends say I'm acting wild as a bug. I'm in love. I'm all shook up. Ironically, some of the worst druggies of the 60s survived. Keith Richards, who underwent a total blood exchange transfusion to pass United States immigration for a 1975 tour, says reflectively of his heroin addiction, "I don't regret what I did. Everybody needs a little kick of something." Mick Jagger, who was once presented with a silver-plated snuff box for cocaine during a Madison Square Garden concert, says of coke, "If you want to take it, fine. What a boring drug." Perhaps the most hedonistic of all groups in the 60s and early 70s. The Beatles not only got high with a little help from their friends, but introduced America to mysticism and transcendental meditation. Their songs in the 60s set the tone for topics as diverse as drugs, war, parents, and respect for authority. The melodies of the Beatles melded into our consciousness. After all, where would Muzak be today without Yesterday and Michelle? The lyrics and lifestyles of the Fabulous Four sparked a revolution and altered society's perception of public decency. Ironically, the most addicted of the four wasn't killed by what he ingested, but by a bullet from the consummate fan.
Oh, I believe in yesterday. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, yesterday came suddenly. Why she...
With so many rock idols of the 60s and 70s gone, the question must be asked, who really killed them? Was it the demands of fans that drove them to destruction? Did their pace of living and their music's message constitute a Bible they believed in, or a message they were driven to by those who adored them? What did songs like this do to the people who heard it in the 60s and 70s? Unfortunately, Sharon Tate isn't going to be around to tell us.
I'm coming down fast, but don't let me break you.
my mind, a lot of rock and rolls in the 60s and 70s was to blame for today's epidemic of AIDS, drug addiction, and illegitimacy, and social disintegration. And Long Island, New York.
Well, I'm an Elvis Presley fan, and I have been since I was 11 or 12 years old.
Well, that's too bad.
And I resent the fact that, like, a lot of people don't know that Elvis was a Christian.
Wait a minute. Who told you that?
I know. I have many books that I've read.
Oh, really?
I have referred to his upbringing in the Baptist church.
No, I'm sorry.
Hello?
You see, you don't even know that. It was an Assembly of God church. It was an Assembly of God church. It wasn't a Baptist church.
Well, it's been a long time. I said I was 11 or 12
I
years
can't
old.
judge whether or not the man was a Christian. I can tell you he didn't act like a Christian.
Well, a lot of people...
Did you read Goldstein's book? You want to know about Elvis? Read Goldstein's book. Read about the sexual fetishes he had with women and the things he made them do and the kinky things that he practiced, like getting two women to undress and make love to each other in front of him.
Well, I think a lot of people, and yourself included, get personal satisfaction out of bringing your sexual topics to children.
No.
Over the airways. And I am a Christian and have been for many years.
And that is a cheap shot. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to do is tell you what the poor man was like in the end. Come on, now you know the guy was a druggie. He was an addict.
Well, don't you have any compassion for the man?
I have compassion for the man, but I don't want to see a hero made out of him. I want people
well, I'm not making a hero out of him,
well,
but
you're upset
I
with
love
me.
his music. He
You're
has a beautiful voice.
No, he what?
I said I loved his music, and I think he has a beautiful voice. I have religious, sacred music that he's performed.
Everybody's entitled to have bad taste, Ann.
Well, I certainly take offense at that because I don't feel that I have bad
Great
taste.
voice. Have you heard Pavarotti lately?
Yes, I have.
Any comparison?
I enjoy a wide variety of music, and I don't feel that it's detrimental to me as a Christian because as a Christian, I'm free.
Okay. Well, I want to tell you, Elvis was a follower of Paramahansa Yogananda, the Hindu mystic. Elvis at times believed he was Jesus Christ. He was into psychic phenomena. It's not. He regularly communicated with a psychic here in Denver. You want to sue these people for telling lies and publishing this in the press? Come on. And what about the illegitimate children he fathered, huh?
Well, isn't it strange that they waited to publish all this till after the man was dead?
Of course it's not strange. Nothing strange at all. Nobody wanted to admit what Liberace was until he was dead. Nobody wanted to talk about what Rock Hudson was until he was dead. At least they've admitted what they were. We aren't willing to admit what Elvis was. Elvis was a poor, pathetic, spiritually empty vessel filled up with dope and all kinds of perversion. And I think that's tragic because the man did have a church upbringing, and he could have turned out right. And when he sang He Touched Me and How Great Thou Art, he could have meant it. No, the music of the 60s and 70s wasn't all bad.
Daddy, can look at yourself, and you can look at others differently by putting your hand in the hand of the man from the Galilee.
But most of it was.
I met a gentle borrowed queen in Memphis. She tried to take me upstairs for a ride.
Rock and roll has a Hall of Fame, though Cleveland is yet to erect an edifice to house the memorabilia of Sam Cooke, James Brown, Buddy Holly, Bo Diddley, Smokey Robinson, the Beatles, and the Beach Boys. Perhaps the most important question is not where the artifacts of their lives will be laid to rest, but where they are today. When Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison died, the Righteous Brothers recorded a song called Rock and Roll Heaven. Remember it? The song said, "If you believe in forever, then life is just a one-night stand. If there's a rock and roll heaven, I know they have one hell of a band." Joplin symbolized sensuality and died from drugs. Hendrix was deeply involved in the occult, and Jim Morrison drank human blood, according to the biography No One Gets Out of Here Alive. Unfortunately, few rock idols of the past confessed Christ. In all likelihood, the Righteous Brothers are right. Jimmy, Janis, and Jim, and the others that join them probably do have a hell of a band. In the 60s, they were the shrill voice of flower power in the Haight-Ashbury era. They sang the glories of drugs in tunes like White Rabbits and advocated violent revolution in tunes like Volunteers. Members of the band were arrested repeatedly for drug possession, causing lead guitarist Paul Cather to comment, "The group paid for the drugs. It was a business expense." Today, they are knee-deep in the hoopla, claiming the city by the bay was built on their music.
We built this
Jefferson Airplane, now known as Starship, wasn't the only 60s band to highlight rock, drugs, and revolution. It was Rolling Stones who advocated violence in their song Street Fightin' Man and Satanism in their anthem Sympathy for the Devil. When 4 fans died at the foot of their stage during the fateful Altamont Rock Festival, their image solidified as purveyors of the sinister.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I've been around for a long, long year. Stole many a man's soul of faith. I was around when Jesus Christ had his moments of doubt and pain. Made damn sure the pilot washed his hands and sealed his face.
Now, in case you don't know the song, it's called Sympathy for the Devil. It's by the Rolling Stones. It was an anthem for Satanists in the 60s. But it was the Beatles who effectively distilled the mood of their age with lyrics focusing on the generation gap, speaking of the loneliness and dislocation of the 60s. One psychiatrist was moved to comment the Beatles speak in an existentialist way about the meaninglessness of actuality. Oh, they're adopting a permissive attitude toward Oriental mysticism, drugs, and the occult. The Beatles' beliefs influenced millions to walk with them down Abbey Road.
What would you think if I sang out a tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song, and I'll try not to sing out of key. Oh, I get by with a little help from my friends. I get
Early on, rock stars recognized they were a force to be reckoned with. Graham Nash, who teamed up with Crosby, Stills, and Young, once said, quote, "Pop music is the mass medium for conditioning the way people think. Pop musicians in today's generation are in a fantastic position. They could rule the world. We have the power." What was done with that power? Was it used for good or evil? Chris Evergreen.
I kind of thought that when your secretary or producer asked me who my favorite group was, and I said Eric Clapton, I thought you might lead off with cocaine.
I just might have, but didn't. But anyway, he got addicted to heroin, unfortunately.
Well, he sure did, and a few other things, including cigarettes and booze. And yet, even so, he produced perhaps the greatest guitar album of all time, Derek and the Dominoes, the Layla album.
Yeah,
And even in that album, there was a cry for help from him called Thorn Tree in the Garden, which referred to the needles that he was injecting himself with for heroin. So I don't condone any of that type of ugly lifestyle. It appalls me. I will say, however, that I think you need a little more balance, and that for every instance of bad songs and bad lyrical content that you can cite, I can cite a few good ones. Cat Stevens, for instance, asked everyone to jump on the peace train, Holy Roller.
Yeah.
And he was right. Crosby, Stills, and Nash told us to teach our children well.
They also wanted to get the Back to the Garden. It was the wrong one.
Yeah. Marvin Gaye said, "What's going on? Why can't we be nice to each other?"
Yeah.
The Jefferson Airplane, whom you just mentioned, said, "We can be together." John Lennon said, "All we are saying is give peace a chance." There was a lot there that was very important.
Wait, excuse me. I have to jump in on you now.
Yeah,
Now,
go ahead.
you brought up Jefferson Airplane.
Sure.
Now, they were also said, singing "Want a Revolution, Got to Revolution."
Got a revolution, yeah.
Now, come on. Now, that was an anthem of the worst of the Weatherman radicals.
It was, and I think that at the time it was necessary. You'll also recall that the Beatles said, "You say you want a revolution," and we know where the lyrics went from there. Well, you better check about it. You better think about that. You better check it out.
Well,
they urged caution and on the same theme.
But they didn't ask you to check it out very far. Yeah, but they did want to change the world. They did change the world, and while they were singing that, John Lennon was adopting Marxist-Leninist ideology. John Lennon said, "Get out of the war," so what did he do? He got in bed with Yoko Ono. I got her pregnant, and he's still married.
I guess I'd rather see him in bed with Yoko than with half a leg missing from a mine in Vietnam.
I don't think either's right. Steve, Dallas.
I wanted to ask about the book and how it, tell me what type of book it is. It describes all the rock idols?
My book?
Yes.
Yeah. A whole chapter on MTV, a whole chapter on heavy metal, a whole chapter on satanic themes and rock music.
I just want to know what angle it's coming from, or what things it's picking out of those programs or MTV or
what it's picking out of them?
Or what point it's making about those type of things? Is it just a review of those groups?
I don't know. Let me read you. AC/DC in the 1980s, 5 delinquents from down under imported to America the firebrand hard rock that captivated Aussies. The source of their name was controversial. According to the rock periodical Circus, AC/DC connotes power and sexual ambiguity. Members of the band say they got their name from the handle of their sister's vacuum cleaner in Sydney. Of the 8 million copy selling album Back in Black, Circus said it's the death-tinged title and double entendre lyrics that made AC/DC the target of attacks by religious extremists. Their approach may seem moronic and barbaric, but there's no hype in the way the band sings and lives. If you want blood, you've got it. An earlier album shows AC/DC's guitarist impaled on the neck of a guitar, lying on the floor drenched in blood. This writer once asked a rock musician who does cover versions of AC/DC songs to comment on the significance of this depiction. Rock and roll kills, he calmly replied with all seriousness. It did kill Bon Scott. The haunting question is, who's next? That's all. You're not going to get any more for free.
Okay, well, I just wanted to understand where the book was coming from. I didn't know if it was like a rock review like Rolling Stone would put out of these groups.
Or a rock review like Rolling Stone from the pen of Bob Larson? Are you kidding? No, come on now. You can't always get what you want.
You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want.
According to Webster's 9th New Collegiate Dictionary, an idol is the representation or symbol of an object of worship, a false god. In a way, that makes rock and roll a religion. It certainly has come a long way from the liturgy of the 60s, but the basic elements of rock's religion are still there. Sex, drugs, rebellion, and defiance of civil and moral authority. But if you think rock and roll began with Ellen Freed, the Cleveland disc jockey, or the hot licks of Chuck Berry and the plastered curl of Bill Haley, guess again. This rhythmic music that struck a responsive chord in the affluent post-war teenage audience was born in the heart of the devil. Now, that's not to say all rock and roll is of the devil. I didn't say that. It doesn't mean Satan has sanctioned all rock songs and singers. It just means that the idolatry associated with rock music has turned people bored of hoax to a blackboard jungle. The difference between God and false idols is longevity. Jesus Christ is very much alive, sadly. The man who claimed that he and his 3 bandmates were more popular than Jesus isn't around anymore to make equally outrageous claims. Remember Alice Cooper making love to a corpse simulating necrophilia in the 70s? And what about the mysticism of the Beatles running after the Maharishi, promoting transcendental meditation, homosexual acts on stage? To say nothing of the likes of Elton John proclaiming that sex with anything short of a goat should be acceptable. What a time it was in the 60s and 70s. Paul McCartney pouted. He refused a ticket to ride and gave the Beach Boys some bad vibrations. Paul refused to show up for his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because he didn't want to appear with fellow ex-Beatles Ringo Starr and George Harrison. McCartney said, "After 20 years, the Beatles still have some business differences. I would feel like a complete hypocrite waving and smiling with them at a fake reception."
She's a big teaser. She took me halfway there. She's a big teaser.
It's ironic that making millions should be such an issue for a band that once proclaimed, "All we need is love." But though he may have imagined a world without religion and politics dominated by socialism, Lennon left a fortune of over $200 million. Much more about the Beatles was ironic. Some would say demonic. The Beatles weren't the only bad boys of the 60s. The Rolling Stones urinated on the streets of London, and Mick Jagger admitted his first sexual experience was with a man. Their album Goat's Head Soup featured a severed goat's head, the symbol of Satan, floating in a boiling cauldron. Did you think rock and roll in the 60s and 70s was all peace, love, and harmony, think again. Much of it was dope-induced. In fact, the Doobie Brothers named themselves after a marijuana joint. The illusions of anthems like Magic Carpet Ride and Take a Journey to the Center of Your Mind were only slightly less direct than the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, a euphemism for a drug-inspired freakout. Perhaps the ultimate question of the 60s was the euphemistic induction into psychedelia posed by Jimi Hendrix. Are you experienced? Was there, and to me it was a bummer. In my opinion, rock idols of the 60s and 70s are directly accountable for much of today's deteriorating morality. I got Brooke on the line.
Yeah, I just want to defend the whole, what all you're saying about the whole music scene in the 60s and 70s.
What about it?
Well, I think that, the music represents what was going on in society. I think they were just merely writing about what was going on in society, not necessarily trying to discriminate or say anything bad. I mean,
Take a Journey to the Center of Your Mind is not social commentary, it's advocatory.
Well, I mean, today people write about what's going on. Back then, it was war and make love and peace and all this. So they wrote about it. It was, not necessarily their general whole belief in everything.
This is not about making love or peace. Come on, when Jimi Hendrix said, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky," what do you think he was talking about? What kind of a purple haze was he looking through?
He was talking about drugs. I mean, I understand that.
Well, now wait a minute. Is he just making a commentary about the times, or is he giving an advocatory attitude? You hear what Nancy Reagan said? She said that people like this, if he were alive today, he's dead, killed himself, people like this are murderers. They are an accomplice to murder.
Why do you say that?
I don't know. Nancy Reagan said it. I think it's great somebody had the guts to finally come out and say that people who advocate casual drug usage or do it themselves are accomplices in the crime of murder, of killing people. And
that was then, though. I mean, if they were alive today, they might not be doing it. Like Led Zeppelin, they were into drugs back then. Robert Plant's a whole different person, in the 80s than he was in the 70s.
That may be true, but drugs weren't the only thing they were into, as you should well know.
If there's a bustard in your hedgerow, don't be alone there. It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen.
Come on, what else was Jimmy Page into?
That's a belief.
What else was Jimmy Page into? You know very well he was into black magic.
You know what? I am a very avid Led Zeppelin fan, and I have studied them, and Jimmy is not a Satan worshiper.
Jimmy Page at one time owned the Equinox, one of the largest occult bookstores in England.
Yeah, and he lives in Mr. Crowley's old
And
house.
who was Mr. Crowley?
Yeah, he does.
Who was Mr. Crowley?
He is supposedly somebody who worshipped Satan.
He was a homosexual Satanist who renamed himself the Beast, 666.
Your head is humming and it won't go, in case you don't know.
It was an era never be repeated. 10,000 people to San Francisco loved and cheering the psychedelic gospel of Timothy Leary. Donovan packing concert halls. Jimi Hendrix setting his guitar ablaze on stage while Jim Morrison was asking people to light his fire. And who could forget the Beatles and the Maharishi? Or the 50,000 people who gathered October 21, 1967 to levitate the Pentagon for peace. There was an odd army that gathered together during the Summer of Love. Runaways, activists, entrepreneurs, and those in search of free sex and free drugs. All you need is love, they sang, and the audience echoed, all we're saying is give peace a chance. The psychedelia of the 60s is gone, but the hallucinogens and the herpes linger on. Shakespeare put it this way: the evil that men do lives after them. 100 Percodins, 150 Quaaludes, 178 Dexedrine pills, 112 Amatols, and 100 biphetamines. That's the prescription given to Elvis Presley the day before he died, August 16, 1977. A Baptist Memorial Hospital employee who saw his corpse said he was an overdose just waiting to happen. In the last 18 months of his life, 12,000 drug dosages were prescribed. No coroner's inquest was conducted. His stomach was pumped, but the contents were destroyed to get rid of the evidence. But in spite of his ignominious end, thousands still flocked to Graceland to pay homage at the shrine of the king of rock and roll.
Walked through a party in the county jail. The prison band was there, they began to wait. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing that rock.
To some, he was the king. To others, the Beatles belonged on the throne. After all, the British government bestowed on them the prestigious Order of the British Empire Medal. Even Paul McCartney's house was set aside as a historical monument of, quote, special architectural interest. At the height of their popularity, Sid Bernstein, who organized their 3 New York concerts, said, "Only Hitler ever duplicated their power over crowds. I'm convinced they could sway a presidential election if they wanted to." Today, more than 30 years after rock and roll first rumbled on America's horizon, more than 150 record executives, producers, performers, broadcasters, and writers vote every year on who will be inducted into Cleveland's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. To qualify, inductees must have had their debut record at least 25 years ago. 1988 saw the addition of baby boomer rock and roll heavyweights, including the Beach Boys, the Beatles, and Bob Dylan.
John is in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on a pavement thinking about the government. A man in a trench coat, badge out, laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off. Look out, kid, it's something you did. God knows when, but you're doing it again. You better duck down the alleyway, looking for a new friend. The man in a coonskin cap and a pig pen wants $11 bills. You only got 10.
Of the man who gave us Lay Lady Lay and Like a Rolling Stone, Bruce Springsteen said he had the vision and talent to expand a pop song until it contained the whole world.
Anyway, Maggie says the man said it must bust early man.
This is the end of Side 1. Please turn the cassette over at this point for the continuation of the message on Side 2.
Well, I saved my pennies and I saved my dimes. Giddy up, all night. Before I knew there would be a time. Giddy up, all night. When I would buy a brand new 409.
Yeah, well, it was the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi who landed in a 747 at Los Angeles International Airport, who was greeted by Mr. Wilson and others as they entertained him on his entourage across America, introducing transcendental meditation, picking up where the Beatles left off, doing what they didn't do. Nice surfer guys, but bad vibrations for metaphysical occultism in America. Mike, Melrose, Maine.
I've listened to rock and roll music for about 15 years, and it doesn't influence me at all, the rock and roll music. Granted, the words aren't the most pleasurable thing, but I listen to it for the music, not
Now, come on,
the
now,
words.
Mike, you're the last person in the world to determine whether or not it affected you. Maybe we ought to talk to people around you and see what they think.
But I understand that, but I mean, rock and roll, it's going to go on forever. I mean, Stairway to Heaven, I know you hate that song. I know you don't like what it stands for, but it's the most popular song requested on FM stations, and it
I
will
know.
be forever.
Well, that doesn't mean you have to sit around and listen to Motley Crue and Judas Priest, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, you want to know the truth? I don't listen to that music because
What
I
did
think
you
it's
listen to?
garbage.
Well, what did you listen to?
I do listen to Led Zeppelin, The Doors, and stuff like that. Bruce Springsteen, I saw the other night. The man made, the only thing I didn't like about Bruce Springsteen the other night, he made fun of Jimmy Swaggart. The man, I don't like what he stands for, but I respect what he did. I respect that he came out with his honesty, and he said he made a mistake. Now, people put him down for that, but I didn't like the way Bruce did that. Do you have anything against Bruce Springsteen, by the way?
Do I have anything against Bruce Springsteen?
Yes, I'm curious.
Just makes too much money.
He just makes too much money. But do you also know that he worked for a year under an assumed name for people who are homeless?
Well, I've never heard that he worked for an entire year under assumed name. The man has been involved in some charitable causes, but I think that when people reach the kind of superstardom status like that on the backs of the fans who have put them there, they owe a bigger debt to society than they've been willing to pay. Bruce has probably been as good about it as anybody, but I don't think he can scratch the surface of what he could do and what he should do.
I just don't see... If it doesn't influence you, as long as kids don't listen to rock and roll albums and run out and do what they do. It does happen occasionally.
Oh, come on. All you got to do is walk down the streets of any city or the corridors of any classroom in America today and look at the T-shirts and see the pentagrams to understand its powerful influence in what they think. Rob.
What kind of role did Judas Priest play in all of this?
I think Judas Priest, as one of the premier heavy metal bands, helped to emphasize the sadomasochistic end of the musical spectrum back in the middle to late 70s. I remember when Judas Priest first came out, they had huge advertisements. Their byline was, Judas Priest has sin for sale. And Rob Halford and the boys made a big deal about the kind of gay S&M overtones of the bikes, the leather, the studs, the whole thing. In fact, Halford even admitted one time that he was into sadomasochism.
Yeah, but see, I grew up around this kind of stuff, and I went through the stage with going out, watching concerts like this, and go out, get drunk, the whole 9 yards. I got it all together, but when I listen back to the music now, I can't understand what possesses people really to listen to this kind of stuff, go out and do the things that are said on these albums.
I think the bottom line in 1 Samuel 15:23, the scripture says rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and the kind of rebelliousness fostered by people like Judas Priest and Alice Cooper and Ziggy Stardust, Bowie in the middle 70s, dealt with a growing kind of spiritual occultism in the psychology of America, the foundational aspect of witchcraft, which is rebellion, and it was being fostered back in the middle of the 70s by bands like this. And the appeal of it is a spiritual oppression that can grip people's lives, but they're unwilling to acknowledge. That's what's behind it ultimately.
Huh. Well, it sometimes doesn't make sense, because it seems like the teenagers, teenagers that are growing up, they go through all this and they can't find an alternative way. They listen to this kind of stuff, and it just seems kind of monotonous. I can't understand really why this kind of music makes people do this kind of thing.
Well, there's also a societal peer pressure, the idea that they are non-conforming to a new kind of rebellious conformity. I mean, walk the corridors at a heavy metal concert. I mean, everybody's a clone of everybody else who looks like everybody on stage, and yet they pride themselves in their non-conformity. The whole idea is what rock and roll was in the beginning. It was rebellion. It was defying whatever the establishment had suggested was the status quo and coming against the authority of parents. It has been the spirit of rock and roll in the beginning. Now, it's not always been as overtly satanic as it is today, but it certainly took a bad turn to the left back in the middle of the 70s, and some of the people I've mentioned were part of it. Ken, Columbus, Ohio.
You seem to have this monolithic view of rock and roll as this power base of decadence, okay? And I have a problem with that, because what the whole idea behind rock and roll was there were these kids that were seeing, the head-chopping days of McCarthyism, and it wasn't working for them. So what they wanted to do was
Wait a minute. What kind of chopping days of McCarthyism?
Yeah, the 50s, the early 60s. It just wasn't working for them. The view of communism was being, infiltrating our society.
What was wrong with the view of communism? It was infiltrating our society. McCarthy may have gotten a little overboard in what he did, but the...
little?
Yeah.
A little?
Hey, yeah, Hollywood was and still is infiltrated with communists, as well as television, and so is rock and roll to a certain extent. Now, I'm not some right-wing John Bircher to have to reach that kind of a conclusion, but you certainly don't see traditional American values upheld in the entertainment media by many people.
Well, okay, that's fine, but the point is, during the 60s, these kids were seeing these days of McCarthyism, and it wasn't working for them. They wanted a way out of it. They thought that maybe, hey, the parents are wrong, so they wanted to try something new.
No, they didn't.
They didn't want to listen to their parents' music.
They didn't think the parents were wrong. The rock and rollers came along and told them their parents were wrong and told them not to listen to their parents.
You see, you're acting like it was a power base that some guy sat.
It was. It was.
No, what it was these kids were collectively coming to this one consciousness. Okay, let's call it that, even though it sounds Californian. And they were trying to pull away from the society that they didn't like. They were tired of it. They didn't want to be like their parents. They didn't want to listen to the music their parents did.
There's never been a generation that did, but there has never been an opportunity for the type of cohesive economic power that we had in post-war America that allowed rock and roll to achieve a separate enclave of generational identity whereby rebellious attitudes could be sold to kids to the highest bidder and paid for. Quite well, thank you.
Well, that's how the way society works. Once you have fed yourself, you can go out and do things for others. Of course, they had the money. They had the leisure time. Granted, it didn't work. The social revolution worked, but it couldn't stick the way they wanted. It was a bit idealistic. Okay, but thank God for the playful experimentation of open minds like that. Because without that, we wouldn't grow as a society. It would still be the 1600s. We'd still be branding each other. They wanted to try. They tried different things. They found out that they tried marijuana. They thought, well, gee, this wasn't so bad. They weren't dying from it, so they went on to the acid.
People have died from it, a lot of them.
Not from marijuana, Bob.
Yes, they have, because of what they got into later because they did pot.
Well, finish my sentence.
Come on, I'm sorry, Ken, but
That's what I was saying. I was saying they tried the pot, then they they thought that wasn't so bad, so then they tried acid. Okay, and by the way, yesterday you said purple haze is marijuana. No, it's acid. Purple microdots is purple haze. Anyway.
Ken.
Yeah?
Look, you're treating this like it's some abstract sociological phenomenon when, in fact, lives were at stake and our whole American society has been perverted as a result of it. I don't take it quite as lightly as you do.
Yeah, but what we're dealing with here, though, is a bunch of kids. They were kids. They were experimenting. Heaven knows what I did when I was that age.
A bunch of kids who finally grew up to be parents, just about as greedy and materialistic as everybody else
Not
is.
true. Pete Townsend was a wild, rebellious child. He's the guy that wrote My Generation. He's the same guy that's putting out his new albums about his family. He's rehabbed from drugs. He said, hey, look, I tried it in the 60s. It didn't work.
Yeah, well, while he was busy experimenting with it, he was taking a lot of other kids down the tubes with him. That's the same. These people are so arrogant, they try out their own little thing. Oh, I tell you, some kid goes out there and snorts a line of coke, can't afford to have his nose cauterized like Mick Jagger can. He can't afford to be detoxified. He can't afford to have a complete drug transfusion like Keith Richards had. He can't afford that type of stuff. So what does he do up? He ends up in hotel hell somewhere in California. He ends up on the street. He ends up with lice in his hair. The kid ends up in the gutter because he can't afford the high living way to get off dope like the rest of these people can.
That's unfortunate.
Unfortunate. No, it's not unfortunate. Why did these rock and roll stars shut their mouths about what dope was doing to them and glorifying a long time ago, and why don't they shut their mouths about it now?
They didn't know then, Bob.
Oh, come on. They did. I knew. Anybody who had an ounce of common sense knew. They didn't want to know because they were too selfishly hedonistic. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, Bob, all I got to say is some of the bands of the 60s and 70s were really good, and the bands nowadays like Motley Crue and Bon Jovi and all those are nothing but counterfeits or copies of some of the really classic bands of the 60s and 70s.
So?
I mean, all I'm saying is they're not doing anything new. I mean, they've been doing it for years. Aerosmith started out doing wonderful music, and then Guns N' Roses comes along, and I don't know if you've heard of them or not.
Yeah, I've heard of Guns N' Roses, Axl and the boys.
They come along, and they're just counterfeits of the original. I mean, they don't do it as good.
They do it worse.
What do you mean by that, Bob?
Morally.
Morally,
they do it worse.
Well, rock and roll has not been known to be a very moral art form.
Well, there's an honest man. There really is one alive in America, folks. You're kidding. Hey.
Yeah?
You talked about Aerosmith, Walk This Way with a kitty in the middle.
Well,
been around for a long time. They just took the Beastie Boys to pick it up again.
Well, that's a really good song, and it was...
Really good song? Come on, it is sexist, dirty. He's talking about a woman's private parts, and he's speaking of it in a vulgar fashion, and you know it.
Well, I don't think so.
Huh?
I really don't think so.
Oh.
I mean, the lyrics in the song really don't mean much of anything. They're just kind of silly nonsense.
No, they're not.
Lyrics.
No, they're not. He's talking about the sexual fashion in which a young lady is portraying herself and his lustful response to it. That's what he's talking about. Connersville, Indiana, got Dan on the line.
I'd just like to say I'm one of those people that used to say I didn't ever listen to the words of the music, you know, and I just kind of would kick back and think, well, I'm just listening to the music and the words don't affect me. But being a Christian now, I look back to what the words really were saying, and I was doing a lot of things with what the words were saying. And I just kind of wanted to give you a word of encouragement, too, because I used to think you were just crazy and nuts and just, you know, out of control. I just couldn't figure out where you were coming from.
Crazy, excuse me, it's crazy, nuts, and out of control.
Yeah,
okay.
I thought, you know, what's going on? I just thought you were just some of the techniques you used I thought were pretty outrageous. But in the last 2 or 3 years, I've got to minister to some juveniles and some drug abusers, and I worked a lot on the streets of San Francisco before I moved back to Indiana. And I really got to appreciate what you're doing and can really see where you're coming from now. And I just wanted to offer you a word of encouragement and say my prayers are with you, and my wife and myself became a Communicator Club member today. And like I said, you know, just really think your ministry is really good now that I, you know, more kind of bit in your shoes, I guess.
Dan, thank you. That is very perceptive. I wonder sometimes if people really do understand why I do what I do and why I do it the way that I do it. Garrison, New York. Matt, thanks for waiting. What's on your mind?
I'm a deadhead. And I just like to say I totally disagree with what you think about the music.
Well, you would if you're a deadhead. Now, Matt, there are only about 3 million people out there right now who are saying, poor man, electrocephalogram has determined that there are no waves coming out of his cerebellum.
Uh-huh.
They don't have any idea what you're talking about. So go ahead, tell them what a deadhead is.
Okay, I'm a fan of the Grateful Dead.
Too bad.
What do you mean, too bad? What's wrong with them?
What do you mean, what's wrong with them? Don't you think that's kind of a foolish question?
No.
Hey, what's wrong with them now is what's wrong with them then.
Driving that train, high cocaine. Case Jones, you better watch your speed. Trouble ahead, trouble behind. And you know that notion just crossed my mind.
Come on now, what do you say about that, Matt?
It's a song that I happen to like a lot. It's not really a pro-cocaine song.
Oh, well, let's tell it to Jerry Garcia. The man's been doing dope for you, and he's been busted how many times? For
clean.
what?
He's clean now.
He's clean now? The guy's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah, and he stopped.
Why? Because he got caught, man. He was going to be sent to the slammer.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And how many kids across the country have done dope because the Dead made it cool?
I know quite a lot of drug-free deadheads.
Not many. It's not the norm.
I don't think that's true. I don't think there's any more drugs at a Grateful Dead concert than at any other concert.
Oh, come on. Matt, get serious, friend. Come on.
I am serious.
You do dope?
Nope.
Nope?
No.
Are you a friend of the devil?
Nope.
You know what you're going to hear now, don't you?
Yep.
Ran into the devil, baby, loaned me 20 bills. Spent the night in Utah in a cave up in the hills. Set out running, but I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. I get home before daylight, just might get me safe tonight.
Friend of the devil, Matt.
Yep.
Yep.
That song also, if you would play the rest of it, you'd see that the guy gets screwed by the devil later on.
Oh. Okay. Matt.
Yeah.
Being a deadhead is not exactly a responsible citizen of society upholding traditional values. Would you not necessarily agree with that? I mean, look at the deadheads at a concert. Come on. They invade this city every year at Red Rocks.
Mm-hmm. And do they do any damage?
Yeah.
What?
To themselves.
Some do, some don't. People do that at every concert.
Not quite with the percentage that they do at a Deadhead concert. Come on now. The Grateful Dead are not known as great espousers of patriotism, morality, the American way, God, and decency.
The American way, God, and decency. I happen to disagree with a lot of things that are so-called the American way, God, and decency.
Yeah, well, let's try God.
What about it?
You disagree with him?
I don't believe that it's possible to know if God exists.
Spoken like a true deadhead.
I think that, how do you know? Just because it says so in the Bible, anybody could have written that. I think we'll all see when we die, and I think we should try to live as best a life we can while we're here, and when we die, we'll see what happens.
The Bible says in Romans 20 that we know and understand the very nature, character, and attributes of God by the created world around us which we behold. That's what the Bible says. So we know God by creation.
How do you know it's true?
Because I've seen a snowflake fall. There are a whole bunch of them piled up outside my window here. I didn't make them, you didn't make them, somebody did. And the crystalline structure that is unique to each snowflake is one of the many miracles of nature that tells me it didn't happen just because amoeba got together.
I agree with you on that. I don't think it's possible to know. I think there is something after death, but what it is, I don't know.
Well, you're sure not going to find out listening to the Grateful Dead, because they're not going to tell you. Tommy, Los Angeles.
You know, you're absolutely right about what these groups do to people. When I was in high school, I used to like Ozzy Osbourne when he was a little bit more wilder, and it changed the attitude that I had towards life. But lately, I guess there's been some pretty good groups that are coming out for good standards and things. One of the groups I really liked was the Jets. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they sing songs about chastity and morality and about keeping yourself clean. There are some good music out there.
There's a little bit, yeah. There is a slight trend of positivism today. I want to tell you, back in the late 60s, wasn't much of that around. Mark and Dallas.
I am a Christian, but my problem is I seem to be drawn to listening, although I'm younger than the 60s era. I didn't grow up in that era. I'd like to listen to that music for some reason, and I defend it with my parents or my peers in my youth group, saying that I don't see really what it's harming my relationship with the Lord, but they all seem to think it is.
Why do you say none of this is affecting you? What do you like? What do you listen to?
Well, I like Jimi Hendrix. I like Led Zeppelin. I like, say, New Boston, Journey.
Yeah?
I like...
well, you're not going to get much good out of Jimmy. Now, come on now, Mark, listen to that. You're not exactly going to be encouraged to treat other Christian young ladies with a great deal of moral respect. Right?
That's true. But I'm not really out doing those things. I'm not out doing the drugs or the pot and so forth. That's why I kind of can't understand. I don't know why I like the music. I just do. I'm not out. I'm not like I don't go to concerts or wear rock and roll T-shirts and so forth.
Well, it's not helping you any, man. I don't know, Mark. I don't think it's such a good idea.
So you probably suggest try to cut it out of my music itinerary.
Well, it's not going to send you to hell on a bandwagon tomorrow, but it's certainly going to help you to get where you need to be.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you did say that it's not going to send me to hell on the bandwagon tomorrow. A lot of my Baptist cohorts, they kind of think that it will, or they seem to project that to me. They think that...
Well, I think they're very zealously concerned for you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are you experienced?
No.
Huh?
No, sir.
Good, Mark. Stay that way.
Lift your hands up, get your mind together.
Criticizing the music of youth isn't new. Socrates put down the unruly rhythms of his day. The evils of swing, flappers, and jazz were said to threaten civilization. Then the gyrations of Elvis and the lifestyles of the Beatles made it seem like apocalypse now. One who was there, Paul Cantor, co-founder of the Jefferson Airplane, And now a middle-aged man says of the 60s, quote, "We were fundamentalist hippies on a mission. We were into drugs and against the establishment, and we had a real zeal for changing the world." However, one reason the 60s scene happened, as John Lennon said, was that it was a great way to meet girls, end of quote. Cantor's right. That's the way it's always been. Rock and roll, drugs, and sex. Too bad this generation doesn't see the bad moon rising. Too bad they didn't see it earlier to realize it wasn't a star that led to Bethlehem, but a beckoning beacon that led to a dead end.
This is the end of the message. For further information regarding other topics available on cassette and in printed form, write Bob Larson Ministries, Box 36A, Denver, Colorado, 80236.